Come here!
After Denmark's defeat in the Second Schleswig War in 1864, Jan Jensen and his younger brother Peter left their homeland behind and journeyed across the Atlantic to America, determined to start anew. Over the next 7 years, they labored tirelessly to establish a life in this unfamiliar land. Yet even amid the relentless struggles of survival, Jan's thoughts remained with his wife, Marie, and their young son, Christian, who had stayed behind in Denmark. Years of separation had left a profound emptiness in Joan's heart. But in 1871, at a border train station in the United States, John and Peter waited anxiously, hearts filled with anticipation. At last, the moment they had long dreamed of arrived. John watched as Marie and Christian stepped off the train, their faces glowing with joyful smiles. Christian reunited with his father with heartfelt love and affection. Joan proudly introduced Marie and Christian to Peter, and together the family began their journey home. Peter mentioned he would remain in town for a while to handle some personal matters. Although Marie didn't speak English yet, she was determined to learn it soon. That warm reunion was abruptly disrupted. Two unfamiliar men approached, their presence marked by a menacing, uneasy air. One of them was Paul Delaroo, the older brother of Henry Delaroo, a notorious gang leader. Recently released from prison, Paul carried a cold, unsettling glare that signaled trouble. From that moment forward, everything began to spiral out of control. That night, as Paul and his companion drifted off to sleep, a brief sense of peace settled inside the wagon. Joan used the quiet moment to teach Christian about the local wildlife and share plans for future hunting trips. But the calm didn't last. Paul abruptly started a conversation with Marie and offered her a drink of water. When she politely declined, a subtle tension filled the air, making the atmosphere uncomfortably awkward. Since Marie didn't speak English, John quietly suggested in Danish that she accept the offer to be polite. Wanting to avoid further discomfort, she agreed. However, Paul didn't stop there. He continued making inappropriate, suggestive remarks, escalating the tension. His words struck a nerve, stirring painful memories from Marie's past, and the growing unease became more and more visible. Paul began making unwanted advances toward Marie, enraging John. When Paul deliberately brushed against her dress, John stepped in and firmly warned him to stop. In response, Paul's companion quickly drew a gun, threatening Joan and ordering him to stay quiet. Fearing for Marie's safety, John whispered to her in Danish, instructing her to bite Paul's ear to create a distraction. She did exactly that. In the chaos that followed, John seized the thug's gun and tried to take control of the situation. He shouted for Christian to grab the other weapon, but Paul reacted swiftly, grabbing the boy and holding a knife to his throat. With cold menace, he threatened to kill the entire family unless John stepped out of the wagon immediately. Joan tried to speak to Marie, but one of the attackers kicked him out of the wagon. Moments later, he came upon a heartbreaking sight: Christian's lifeless body lying by the roadside. Crushed by grief and shock, John cradled his son in his arms and wept. Then, with quiet resolve, he lifted the boy's body and continued walking. Farther down the road, John saw the wagon had stopped. He gently laid Christian down and approached the fallen driver, retrieving his gun. Drawing on his skills as a former soldier, John fired a shot to startle the horses, then turned his aim on the attackers. He swiftly took down one of them and pursued Paul, who was fleeing the scene. Paul pleaded for his life, claiming he hadn't harmed anyone, but by then, it was too late. The point of no return had already passed. The next morning, Peter arrived and immediately noticed unfamiliar horses nearby. Sensing something was wrong, he went to investigate and was horrified to find Joan sitting in tears beside the lifeless bodies of Marie and Creston. Peter tried to comfort his grief-stricken brother, but John could only whisper that he didn't know who had done it. The two brothers embraced, both consumed by sorrow. The scene then shifts to a dusty town in the Wild West, where a group of armed men on horseback rides in with swagger and entitlement as if they owned the place. At the head of the group is Henry Delaroo, a ruthless former Union colonel infamous for his brutal campaigns against Native Americans. He dismounts and strides toward Mayor Nathan Keene, who also serves as the town's priest and undertaker. Henry's furious expression leaves no doubt. Trouble is coming. Henry Delaroo demanded answers about the two dead men found nearby. Mayor Keene, visibly uneasy, insisted that no one in the town had anything to do with the incident. What neither he nor the townspeople knew, however, was that one of the bodies belonged to Paul Delaroo's brother. That truth remained hidden, casting a growing shadow over the town as the situation edged closer to danger. Delaroo finally broke his silence, issuing a chilling ultimatum. The town had until noon to find the killer, or he would execute two innocent townspeople in retaliation. Justifying his threat with twisted biblical references, he claimed it was a form of righteous punishment. To escalate the pressure, he warned that if the mayor refused to choose the victims, he would raise the toll, killing 4 instead of 2. Soon after, 2 townspeople were selected as victims: Mrs. Borowski, an elderly woman who owned the local gun shop, and a one-legged man. Delaroo shot and killed the disabled man on the spot. Mrs. Borowski's grandson wept beside her, but she remained steadfast, praying aloud for Delaroo's wicked soul. He showed no mercy, killing her without hesitation. But Delaroo wasn't finished. He murdered yet another innocent man in front of the victim's horrified wife, completely devoid of remorse. Sheriff Malik pleaded with the townspeople to stay calm and avoid taking action, but Delaroo's reign of terror left them feeling helpless. He continued tightening his grip on the town, raising protection fees and inflating prices with impunity. Meanwhile, at Paul's funeral, his mute widow, Malene, stood in silence beside his grave. Delaroo offered a few words of comfort, but they were cold and emotionless. Elsewhere, John and Peter held a somber funeral for Marie and Creston. Grief weighed heavily on them, but beneath it burned a growing desire for revenge, one that ultimately pushed them to leave town and head west. Their exceptional marksmanship quickly drew attention, and whispers began to circulate. Some townspeople started to suspect the brothers might have had a hand in Paul's death. When they reached the town of Black Creek, someone tipped off the sheriff. Some believed that men like John were exactly what the town needed to stand up to the rising tide of violence. But everyone also understood that challenging Delaroo was a near impossible task. During this time, John approached Mayor Keene to sell his land. Keene, however, offered only half its original value, citing Delaroo's new taxes and growing threats as justification. It was then that John came to a grim realization: the man he had killed was Paul Delaroo. With no better option, John reluctantly agreed to the low offer. Keene advised him to hide the money in his boot for safekeeping, warning that too many desperate people out there would kill for even a fraction of it. Meanwhile, Delaroo and Malene, known to some as the Princess, met with representatives from the Standard Atlantic Oil Company. The businessman handed Delaroo a sum of money but warned him that his violent tactics could create serious complications if they got out of hand. They revealed that the federal government had already cut off Black Creek's water supply, leaving Sheriff Malik powerless and without support. The company's true objective was to acquire all the land in the region, which sat atop a massive oil reserve. They wanted Delaroo to use force to help secure their control. Shortly after, Peter was captured following a violent struggle. Soon afterward, Sheriff Malik had a serious conversation with John. He admitted that the situation had grown dire and urged John to consider turning himself in. Malik believed that Joan's sacrifice might buy the town enough time for federal reinforcements to arrive. Though the idea pained him, he saw it as possibly the town's last chance to alter the course of events. The next morning, beneath a dry, silent sky, Sheriff Malik handed Joan over to Delaroo's gang. Before he could be taken away, Delaroo's right-hand man delivered a brutal, humiliating blow. Joan was then tied to a rough wooden post outside Delaroo's headquarters, left to suffer under the relentless sun. Delaroo soon appeared, accompanied by Malene, the mute widow of his late brother. Despite his exhaustion, John tried to speak to her, desperate to reveal the truth, that it was Delaroo who had murdered his son and assaulted his wife. But Delaroo silenced him with another strike, refusing to hear a word. With a cold, dismissive glare, he warned that Joan's true nature would eventually come to light. Delaroo's plan was brutally simple. He tied Joan to a post beneath the scorching sun, depriving him of food and water, intending to let the heat and exhaustion slowly kill him. Hours dragged on as the sun blazed overhead, and vultures began circling in the sky. Just as the situation seemed utterly hopeless, Mayor Keene appeared unexpectedly. At first, it looked as if he had come to help, but instead, he seized the opportunity to steal Joan's boots and the money hidden inside. With a crooked smile and a strangely cheerful tone, Keene addressed Delaroo by his first name, revealing the disturbing alliance between them. Meanwhile, while Sheriff Malik attended a church service, Peter Jones' older brother was back at the jailhouse, quietly preparing his escape. Unlike John, Peter was more cunning and quick-thinking under pressure. He deliberately taunted the deputy guarding him, using sharp, provocative remarks to push the man into losing his temper. The deputy, taking the bait, unaware he was being lured into a trap. Meanwhile, at Delaroo's hideout, it was clear he felt no grief over his brother Paul's death. Instead, he treated malign Paul's mute widow as if she were his property. Despite the bruises on her face and the fear in her eyes, Delaroo forced himself on her. The marks on her body told the truth. This wasn't love, it was violent control. Delaroo spoke of grand plans, promising Malene she would become the Queen of New Orleans. But it was a future she neither believed in nor desired. That night, as rain poured relentlessly from the sky, John remained tied to the post-soaked, exhausted, and barely conscious. At last, Peter arrived to free him. As they fled, Peter and John ran into two members of Delaroo's gang. Peter reacted instantly, shooting them both before they had a chance to raise alarm. His quick, decisive action allowed their escape to go unnoticed at first. But it wasn't long before Delaroo's men gave chase on horseback. Weakened and exhausted, John fell from his horse. Thinking fast, Peter dragged him behind a large rock to keep him hidden. Realizing the gang wouldn't stop searching, Peter made a bold decision. He would act as a decoy. He split off from Joan, drawing the pursuers away and leading them deep into the distance. The next morning, John woke up weak, dehydrated, and barely clinging to consciousness. Desperate for water, he crawled to a muddy puddle and drank greedily. But his brief moment of relief quickly turned to horror when he spotted one of Delaroo's men dragging Peter's lifeless body behind a horse. Meanwhile, back at Delaroo's compound, chaos had erupted. The safe was empty, and Malene was gone. She had taken the oil money and fled to the train station. Standing beside the train with a heavy bag of cash, Malene scanned her surroundings anxiously, determined to leave everything and everyone behind. Delaroo appeared suddenly and struck Malene hard across the face. But she refused to cower. Instead, she spat blood into his eyes in defiance. Enraged, Delaroo was moments away from killing her when his right-hand man intervened, insisting she was still valuable. Reluctantly, Delaroo spared her for the moment. Meanwhile, Joan was wandering the dry, barren land near Black Creek when he stumbled upon Mrs. Whistler, a tough, heavily armed landowner. As he approached her well, she fired a warning shot. But Joan, parched and desperate, kept moving forward.
Drink from the well.
When he finally reached the well, he discovered the devastating truth: it was filled with crude oil, not water. Once Mrs. Whistler realized who John was, she lowered her gun, welcomed him into her home, and offered him food and clean water. She, too, had suffered. Her husband had fallen victim to the violence unleashed by Delaroo. That night, Joan took a gun and paid a visit to Mayor Keene's house. He forced Keene to return the boots and the money he had stolen. During the tense confrontation, John learned that Keene had once bought land from Mrs. Whistler. When Keene tried to lie, John shoved him into an open coffin, sending him into a panic. Terrified, Keene finally confessed. He had handed the land deeds over to Delaroo, playing a key role in helping him seize control of the town. John then made his way to Mrs. Whistler's old store, now operated by her grandson Voich. There, he stocked up on supplies, ammunition, and flammable liquids. He instructed Voich to alert Sheriff Malik about the secret alliance between Delaroo and Mayor Keene. Delaroo, convinced the region's oil would soon be worth a fortune, had tightened his grip on the town. The next morning, Joan set his plan into motion. He placed Keene's body in a coffin, using it as bait to draw Delaroo in. When Delaroo opened the lid and saw the corpse, he panicked and ordered it burned. At that moment, Voich lit a nearby campfire as a diversion. Hidden from view, John took aim and opened fire.
Horns on fire!
Voich courageously climbed onto the rooftop, carrying flammable materials to aid Joan's ambush. However, the noise from above alerted one of Delaroo's thugs, who went to investigate and discovered Malene tied up inside. Voich tried to shoot him but missed and was fatally shot by another thug from below. As the gunman casually lit a cigarette, unaware the floor was soaked in fuel, John heard the commotion and rushed toward the growing flames. Spotting the thug dragging Malene outside, John took aim and shot him in the leg, dropping him instantly. As John stepped into the open, he made a crucial mistake. He forgot about Delaroo. The gang leader fired, striking Joan and bringing him to the ground. Just as Delaroo prepared to deliver the final blow, Malene appeared. A single gunshot rang out, and suddenly, Joan and Malene were facing each other, guns raised in a tense standoff. But after a long, heavy pause, they slowly lowered their weapons. Both had endured too much pain, and now they stood united against a common enemy. At that moment, Sheriff Malik arrived with reinforcements. He thanked Joan for saving the town, but grew visibly uneasy when he saw Malene. Sensing the tension, Joan calmly assured him that he would keep her safe. With no better option, Malik reluctantly stepped aside. As peace slowly returned to the town, Joan and Malene slipped away together, bound by shared pain, a thirst for justice, and the unyielding will to survive. A new chapter had begun.